If you are currently standing at a pivotal crossroads, you know the one that defines the next 5 years of your career, maybe your personal life, and you find yourself just cycling.
Cycling through the same arguments over and over.
Exactly. The same 5 arguments for the 10th time. Analyzing every possible vector, checking the weather, and, calculating the exact velocity you'll need to avoid some minor inconvenience 3 miles down the road.
If that's you, then this deep dive is for you.
It really is, because the perspective we are unpacking today, it doesn't view that kind of measured, continuous pause as prudence.
Not at all. It views it as a failure, an operational, a psychological, and even a moral failure.
We're diving into a source that is relentlessly, almost uncomfortably focused on decisiveness. And its central claim, it just hits you immediately. It demands an answer.
And that claim is, if you can't decide, you're already losing.
That's the foundation right there. It's serious, it's immediate, and it aggressively dismisses all the common excuses we tend to hide behind.
This text, it really pulls no punches. It's presenting a very stark philosophy where hesitation isn't some neutral state of prepping or getting ready.
No.
No, it's defined as a profound failure of responsibility. I mean, it's framed as an evasion of the duties that are just inherent in adulthood and leadership.
Absolutely. And for you, the learner, especially if you're used to navigating highly complex information, this deep dive is less about the technical challenge of the decision itself. The numbers, the market data.
Right, it assumes you can handle that part.
It does. It's entirely about the psychological willingness to execute, to commit.
Yeah.
We're analyzing a perspective that just flat out rejects the cultural normalization of overthinking as some kind of benign excuse.
So our mission today is surgical. We are extracting the key arguments that equate decisiveness with strength and, conversely, equate indecision with evasion, with hiding.
We're asking, what precisely is the source telling you is the true cost when you hesitate?
And the answer gives is that it's far more than just a delayed outcome. It's the erosion of your agency itself.
Let's unpack this aggressive stance then. Let's start with how it immediately dismisses our most common alibis for inaction, the rationalizations we use to feel productive while we're just standing still. The source kicks off by making this immediate and really crucial distinction that fundamentally challenges how most intelligent people rationalize delay.
It does. It states it so plainly. Indecision, it says, has nothing to do with intelligence or being careful.
And that phrase, that just pulls the rug out from under so many of us, doesn't it?
It's a complete intellectual destabilizer. Because we're socially conditioned to believe that hesitation is a mark of high intellectual capacity.
Of course. The person who can see all the angles, all the contingencies, who can model the widest array of variables, that's the smartest person in the room, right?
That's the assumption. But this source deliberately, and I think strategically, isolates the act of choosing from technical competence. It suggests you can be the most brilliant strategist imaginable.
You could have spreadsheets that predict the future?
Exactly. You could be capable of running 50 different outcomes through a complex model, and you can still fail. Fundamentally fail. Why? Because you cannot execute step one.
Commit to a choice.
You just can't commit.
So it's a complete separation of knowledge from will. I could possess perfect knowledge, have the blueprint for success laid out right in front of me, but if I lack the will to convert that knowledge into committed action,
then the knowledge is inert. It's just useless data. It's academic.
So if the source says the issue isn't about intelligence, and it's also not about genuine tactical caution, what is the core issue being identified here?
The core issue is fear. It's just fear, but it's cleverly disguised as diligence.
Huh.
And the source isolates this not as some vague character flaw, but as a definable action, or more accurately, a chosen non-action, with a clear psychological diagnosis.
Which is?
The avoidance of responsibility.
I want to focus on the mechanism of that disguise for a moment. The text is very explicit about this. We call that phenomenon overthinking, that endless loop of secondary, tertiary analysis. But the source insists you are hiding from consequences. So how does this philosophy draw such a sharp line between genuine, thoughtful consideration and what we often call analysis paralysis?
I think the line is drawn at intent. Genuine thought within this framework is always oriented toward a single goal: achieving a rapid, executable conclusion.
Okay, so it's thought for the sake of action.
Precisely. You utilize data to aggressively narrow the options and inform the best next action. Notice, the goal is not certainty. The goal is forward momentum. You are calculating the risk, and then you are moving.
In hiding.
Hiding, conversely, uses the pursuit of data, the demand for more information, as a permanent shelter. It's a foxhole made of spreadsheets and what-if scenarios.
That's a powerful image.
Because the hesitant person is not actually seeking the optimal solution, they're seeking the guaranteed solution. They're on a quest to gather enough data to eliminate the possibility of failure entirely.
Which is impossible.
It is an inherently childish demand. They're demanding a world without consequence or risk, and reality will never, ever honor that demand.
Wow. Labeling the pursuit of perfect certainty as a form of intellectual immaturity. That is a severe and uncomfortable assessment.
It's harsh, yes, but is what provides the critical connection between action and the source's definition of adult responsibility.
So what is that definition?
Responsibility in this high-stakes context isn't just about managing the outcomes of your choices. That's part of it, of course.
Yeah.
But the real definition is about committing to action regardless of the known risks.
Because risk is just the default state.
Risk is the operating environment of reality. The person who demands perfect data before moving is effectively saying, I will only participate in life if I am certain I cannot fail or get hurt.
Which is never.
Never. The responsible man, the man as the source defines him, says something very different. He says, I will move now, and if I fail, I will bear the full, undiluted consequence of that failure.
So the choice itself, the commitment to face the consequences.
Yeah.
That's the entry point.
That is the entry point to maturity, according to this entire philosophy. The very act of demanding perfect information is an operational surrender to fear. Specifically, the fear of having to pay the price.
And this taps into a known cognitive bias, doesn't it? Loss aversion.
Exactly. We are wired to prioritize avoiding a loss over achieving an equivalent gain. The pain of losing $100 feels much worse than the pleasure of finding $100.
So the hesitant person is paralyzed by that potential pain.
So paralyzed that they choose non-action, which they wrongly perceive as avoiding the risk altogether. But as the source clarifies, they are not avoiding risk. They are merely swapping one risk for another.
What's the swap?
They're swapping an uncertain risk, the risk of failure from taking action, for a guaranteed risk.
The risk of failure from stagnation.
Precisely. And the consequence of this tactical avoidance is that you can delay indefinitely, but the world absolutely does not.
Right. The source is extremely urgent about this. It says, your job, your relationships, your future, they don't pause while you think.
This point really explores the fatal implication of living inside constantly moving systems. Think about it. A career, a market cycle, a major relationship, even your own health.
They're all dynamic. They're not static problems on a page.
There are complex engines operating in real time. And when you fail to input a conscious, committed choice into one of those engines, it doesn't just freeze in place politely waiting for your decision.
No, it keeps running.
It keeps running.
Yeah.
And it's internal logic, or the inputs from other competitive actors, or just sheer momentum and inertia. That is what determines the next stage, not you.
So this means that if I don't choose, the system, in effect, chooses the option of non-action for me.
Yes.
And that non-action will still have consequences. But those consequences are now determined externally without the benefit of my intentional direction.
Precisely. You may genuinely believe you're exercising the ultimate caution, that you're preserving your options by not moving. But in reality, you are completely ceding control of the narrative.
So my non-action is an input.
Your non-action is functionally the same as an input, yes. But it's an input dictated by fear, and it leads to externally imposed consequences. And critically, those externally imposed consequences are almost always worse than the ones you would have consciously chosen for yourself, even if your choice led to failure.
Why worse?
Because they lack your agency. They happen to you, not because of you.
Yeah.
The true cost is the loss of that agency in the decisive moment. And that loss, as we're about to see, compounds dramatically. It leads to stagnation.
Okay, so we've established the internal mechanism fear disguised as diligence. Now, let's talk about what this looks like when that mechanism runs its course. If I hide long enough, what are the visible, physical, and social tolls this behavior exacts? When the source starts to discuss the cost of this failure, it doesn't use abstract business metrics or, psychological jargon. It gets very personal.
It does. It introduces a powerful, visceral metaphor that speaks directly to the individual's felt experience.
Which is, hesitation doesn't protect you, it shrinks you.
And that is a remarkable piece of psychological phrasing. Shrinks. It implies an active, immediate reduction, a diminishment of your personal scale and relevance.
So what does it mean to shrink in this context? day to day for the person listening right now?
It means a contraction of your influence, a reduction in your potential. It means a loss of personal territory in every single arena of your life.
Which is the exact opposite of self-preservation, isn't it? That's the irony.
It's the ultimate irony. We hesitate because the perceived goal is to protect ourselves from damage. Financial damage, emotional damage, reputational damage. But the source insists that the act of hesitation itself causes the damage.
By reducing what you are capable of achieving or even what you feel you have the right to demand.
Exactly. We can link this directly to the biological concept of atrophy. It's a perfect parallel.
Okay, explain that.
If power, and let's define power here as the ability to act, to influence, to commit resources. If that power is not exerted when it's necessary, it doesn't just rest harmlessly in reserve.
It weakens.
It begins to waste away. Think about a muscle you don't use. It weakens, it shrinks. The hesitant man's world becomes smaller because every choice he refuses to make limits the scope of the future choices that will be available to him.
So one non-decision closes the door to 10 future possibilities.
And that compounds. He becomes less necessary to others. His relevance diminishes. His sphere of influence collapses inward. And on a personal, internal level, this manifests as reduced confidence, lower self-expectation, and eventually a resignation to lesser opportunities. He literally shrinks his life down to the size of his fears.
And this shrinking isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening against a backdrop of dynamic competition.
A very dynamic one. The source emphasizes this with a stark parallel. He says, while you wait, other men move, make mistakes, get hit, learn fast, and grow stronger.
That is a devastating juxtaposition. It fundamentally prioritizes high-velocity momentum over meticulous, slow caution.
It does. The people who are moving are accumulating experiential data, which the source clearly frames as the most valuable kind of data at a rapid compounding rate. And notice the process. It's described brutally, almost in a military way.
Move, make mistakes, get hit, and then learn.
Get hit. That's the part we try to avoid at all costs.
Let's focus on that get hit phrase. It means you have to internalize setback, failure, or pain as necessary inputs for growth. But this sounds dangerously close to advising recklessness. How does the source differentiate between committed decisiveness and just truly impulsive, unthinking error?
That's a crucial distinction and a fair question. The source isn't advocating for blind impulse. It's advocating for a functional decision-making loop. You could relate it to military strategist John Boyd's ODI loop.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Exactly. The strength in that model comes from the speed of the loop, not from the initial perfection of the decision. And an impulse error is just breaking the loop. You're skipping the observe and orient phases. You're just acting.
And hesitation.
Hesitation is also breaking the loop. But you're getting permanently stuck between orient and decide. You're just observing and orienting forever.
So the active man, the one who is getting hit, is just running that loop very, very quickly.
He's deliberately running the loop quickly. He makes a mistake, he takes the hit, but that mistake immediately provides clean, high-impact data. It allows him to reobserve, reorient, and redecide much faster the next time.
So failure in this view is the fast track to strength.
It's the express lane. Because the lessons from real-world consequence are immediate, they're undeniable, and they are indelibly impactful. They are far more effective than any simulation or any amount of what-if planning.
Meanwhile, the hesitant person stays stuck, calling it preparation. They maintain the illusion of forward motion because they're perpetually researching or modeling.
And it is the ultimate self-deception in this philosophy. They're preparing for a moment of perfect clarity and total safety that will never, ever arrive.
Because the true moment for action always requires a leap of faith.
It always requires a leap beyond the data you currently possess. Stagnation is simply the active delay of the inevitable learning curve. The active person endures the pain of that curve quickly and then starts accruing the benefits of compounded growth and capability.
And the stagnant person.
The stagnant person just remains at the starting line, conceptually prepared but functionally impotent. The source basically suggests there is no true preparation without the commitment to application.
This philosophical preference for decisive action, even messy action, it seems to have a massive social reward attached to it.
Huge.
The source highlights the critical currency of respect. It says, real men aren't respected for being perfect. They're respected for being decisive.
This analysis of respect is, I think, entirely transactional, and it's completely divorced from the outcome.
What do you mean by that?
The respect isn't earned by the result of the choice, whether the market favored the decision or the partnership thrived. The respect is earned by the willingness to commit to it and to be accountable for it.
So it's the active commitment itself that people respect.
Yes, the confidence to stand behind an imperfect choice, in this view, far outweighs the polished academic inability to make any choice at all.
So let's take a scenario. A manager who makes a messy, high-stakes decision on a project and then owns the fallout, even if the project fails.
Is respected more than the manager who avoids the decision by delaying, by calling for more meetings, by asking for more reports.
Thus ensuring they avoid any personal blame for the inevitable external collapse of the project.
Absolutely. Because decisiveness signals internal commitment. It signals mental fortitude. And most importantly, it signals a willingness to assume leadership, even if you're only leading your own project or your own life.
And indecision signals the opposite.
Indecision signals fear of judgment and the avoidance of responsibility. And in the source's view, the moment you display that fear, you forfeit the moral authority that's required for respect.
People are drawn to a clear vector.
People instinctively gravitate toward those who project a clear vector, even if that vector involves risk. A ship needs a captain who commits to a course, not a committee that's still debating the optimal sailing angle while the storm is on the horizon.
That is a challenging priority inversion, especially for anyone who prides themselves on their meticulousness, on their thoroughness.
It's very challenging.
This suggests that the speed and the commitment of the choice are actually more important than the preliminary quality of the analysis leading up to it.
It demands that we accept a concept like satisficing. Choosing the good enough option that facilitates momentum rather than optimizing for the absolute best, which risks paralysis.
The perfect is the enemy of the good.
A very aggressive version of that, yes. The source believes that the true genius lies in making the best possible choice you can with insufficient data, committing to it fully, and then being able to rapidly adjust when the inevitable failure data comes back.
And that leads us directly to how the source redefines what true strength even is. Okay, this is where the source's philosophy really crystallizes. It becomes a stark, almost Spartan directive.
It does. The text defines true strength in direct opposition to our very human need for certainty.
The quote is, "Strength is not knowing the outcome. Strength is choosing anyway and standing behind that choice."
This definition is foundational to the entire argument. It completely eliminates certainty as a prerequisite for power.
Which is how most people think of it.
Most people mistakenly view strength as the ability to control the outcome to guarantee success. This source radically redefines strength as the ability to endure and manage the consequence of an uncertain choice.
So the powerful person isn't the one who guarantees they won't fall.
No. They're the one who guarantees they will handle the landing no matter how rough it is.
Let's unpack that critical high-stakes phrase, standing behind that choice. What does that actually look like in practice in the face of an inevitable setback or a total failure?
It demands what you could call radical acceptance and accountability. It means accepting failure not as an endpoint, but as an input.
As data.
As clean, valuable data. It means absorbing the necessary hit, whether that's a financial loss, public criticism, or emotional pain, and managing the fallout without resorting to external blame.
That's the key part.
It's the hardest part. If the decision goes sideways, the committed man doesn't say, well, the market shifted unexpectedly, or my team failed to execute, or the classic, I just didn't have enough data.
So what does he say?
He simply says, I chose this path. The consequences are mine to bear, and now I will manage them and learn from them.
It is the absolute antithesis of the hesitant person we described earlier, the one who is hiding from those very consequences.
Precisely. The hesitant person tries to delay consequences indefinitely. The strong person, as defined here, volunteers for the consequences immediately.
Volunteers for them.
In a sense. By acting, they understand that they are inviting consequence. They understand that absorbing the pain and the data that pain generates is the only proven path to growth and to increased capability.
You had an analogy for this. The cliff in the fog.
Right. If you are standing at the edge of a cliff in a dense fog, the hesitant person spends all day trying to measure the distance. They throw rocks, they use sonar, they try to eliminate every microgram of uncertainty before they'll even consider moving.
And the strong person.
The strong person commits to the jump. They understand that the only way to know the result is through action. And crucially, they have already prepared themselves mentally to deal with whatever terrain they land on, whether it's a soft field or a pile of rocks.
The strength is in the commitment, not the measurement.
The strength is in the act of faith, agency, and accountability. not in the preliminary measurement.
This intentional embrace of difficult consequence is what underpins the source's most severe, almost existential dichotomy.
It's definitely the most controversial line.
Comfort creates boys. Decisions create men.
This is perhaps the most challenging and, for some, potentially offensive line in the entire text. But it's critical to understanding the source's worldview. We have to define comfort the way the source does.
And how is that?
Comfort here is defined extremely broadly. It's not just physical ease or luxury. It is the intellectual and psychological avoidance of difficult, high-stakes choices. It's remaining in a perpetual state where nothing truly consequential, nothing with potential for real pain, is ever on the line.
So if that is the definition of comfort, what defines men in this specific, severe context?
Manhood, philosophically speaking, and only within the confines of this source, is defined by the intentional embrace of consequence and the assumption of sovereignty over your own life.
It's the willingness to make a choice that carries a genuine risk of failure and pain.
And then to accept full, unilateral responsibility for that pain. The source views the avoidance of painful, difficult choices as perpetually keeping oneself in a state of dependent, protected immaturity. That's the boy category.
The decision is the crucible.
The decision is the crucible. The moment you make a high-stakes, committed choice, you introduce inevitable friction and pain into your life. But that friction is what forges true character and capability.
This raises an important question then. Does the source allow for any middle ground in this dichotomy? Is there permission for moderate caution, or is this truly a binary system where you are either acting or hiding?
Based on the source's uncompromising language, if you can't decide, you're already losing. It operates fundamentally as a binary system.
There's no gray area.
Very little. The core metric is sovereignty. Are you in command or are you waiting for orders? Non-choice defaults you immediately to the boy category because it is defined by comfort, dependence, and responsibility avoidance.
So any delay?
Any delay that cannot be immediately justified as part of a rapid executive decision-making loop is considered hiding. The entire philosophy is built on the absolute necessity of generating forward momentum.
And to ensure that momentum is generated, the source provides a surprisingly concise action plan. It's almost military grade.
It is. It's not a single act, but an iterative loop.
Decide, take the hit if you must, adjust, and move forward.
And that three-step loop is the essential engine for continuous movement and learning. Its primary function is to radically reduce the cognitive load associated with making that first choice.
How does it do that? How does institutionalizing failure making, take the hit, the expected second step, actually remove pressure? That sounds counterintuitive.
It sounds it, but think about it. If you are told that the first step, decide, must lead to a guaranteed success.
The pressure is immense, paralyzing.
It's paralyzing. You have to analyze everything because failure is simply not an acceptable outcome. But if you are told, decide, knowing you may need to immediately proceed to step 2, take the hit, the decision becomes much simpler and much faster.
Because it's no longer about getting it perfect.
It's about getting the process started. The initial decision is treated as a draft. It's an initial hypothesis that needs real-world testing. The goal of the decision isn't success. The goal of the decision is to generate data.
So the speed of the loop, decide, get data from the hit, incorporate that data by adjusting. That's the true measure of strength, not the initial accuracy of this decision.
Exactly. We are prioritizing learning cycles over planning duration.
Give me an example of that.
Okay. If one manager spends a full year crafting a perfect, unassailable, 100-page business plan, and a second manager commits to a decent, good enough plan in 2 weeks, fails, takes the hit, adjusts, and then repeats that cycle 25 times in the same year.
Who's ahead at the end of the year?
The second manager is exponentially more capable, more knowledgeable, and more effective by the end of that year, even with 25 failures on his ledger.
Because he has 25 real-world data points. The other guy has 0.
The source implicitly rejects the slow, bureaucratic model of decision-making that seeks consensus and safety. It embraces a rapid, adaptive, high-consequence model. Failure is never an endpoint in this system. It's merely the data required for the next improved decision loop.
So the man who cycles through this loop quickly will always outpace the man who spends years crafting the perfect, never-implemented plan.
Simply because the world is moving too fast for stagnation to ever pay off. The world rewards velocity.
This philosophy has built its arguments so rigorously, I think. It moves from that internal psychological failure to the external operational failure. But it saves its most powerful, its most sobering ultimate warning for those who fail to embrace this model.
It does. The source warns that if you fail to steer your own life, the consequences extend far beyond your own internal state.
The text declares, if you can't choose, don't be surprised when no one follows you.
And this point addresses the critical, highly practical link between decisiveness and leadership. And that can be leadership in a corporate boardroom, or simply leadership within your own household.
The principle is the same.
The principle is identical. If you consistently demonstrate an inability to commit, even to your own direction, you forfeit your right to guide others. Leadership, at its most fundamental level, requires the projection of a clear vector and a sense of certainty.
And that projection has to be authentic, right? It has to be based on real commitment, not just theater.
It has to be, because followers, whether they're your employees or your family members, are constantly scanning for stability and forward motion. It's a survival instinct.
So if a potential leader hesitates constantly,
They are signaling internal chaos. They're signaling fear and a fundamental lack of conviction. And the question becomes, why would anyone willingly risk their own future by following someone who cannot even commit to their own choices?
the inability to choose is seen as a lack of the core quality of leadership.
It's seen as lacking the foundational quality the source attributes to legitimate authority, the willingness to bear consequence on behalf of the group. You simply cannot lead from a position of hiding.
But the source's warning then escalates dramatically. It goes beyond just leadership failures and focuses on the most severe personal consequence, the true loss of sovereignty.
This is the endgame.
And don't be shocked when life chooses for you and you hate the result.
This is the critical final consequence of lost agency. Reality, nature, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It fundamentally abhors a vacuum.
Okay.
In the absence of a conscious, committed choice from you, the individual external forces will rush in to fill that void.
Huh.
And we're talking about powerful, indifferent pressures,
Like what?
like major economic shifts that wipe out your savings because you failed to decide on an investment strategy.
Right.
Or certain health issues that derive from years of defaulted, unconscious lifestyle choices you never made.
Or just social pressure.
Social expectations that force you into a career or a relationship path simply because it was the easiest available option, the path of least resistance. Or just the aging process, a biological clock, imposing deadlines you never acknowledged.
And the hatred that results from this, it's a very specific negative emotion. It's not sadness over a choice that went wrong.
No, it's resentment over forfeited control.
That is the essential psychological distinction, isn't it?
It is. If you consciously make a choice and it fails spectacularly, you feel regret, you feel loss, you feel pain. But you maintain your sense of self-sovereignty. You chose the path, you owned the result.
There's a strange dignity in that, even in failure.
There is. However, when life chooses for you, the resultant negative emotion is pure resentment. It's a bitterness over a destiny that was dictated by indifferent external forces.
So the man who willingly hesitated and surrendered the steering wheel.
He now has no intellectual or moral ground to stand on to complain about his circumstances. He feels cheated, but the cheating was self-inflicted through his own non-action.
It's the ultimate consequence of being passive. You become an unwilling passenger in your own life, totally subject to the whims of the external world, and you eventually end up hating the destination the world has picked for you.
And that passivity, that surrender, it culminates in the source's final arresting image. And it's not a dramatic, high-profile collapse, it's a subtle tragedy.
Because hesitation is how a man slowly disappears without anyone noticing.
And that brings us full circle, right back to the shrinking metaphor from the beginning.
It does. Indecision isn't a sharp, recognizable failure that sparks some external reaction or intervention. It's a gradual, quiet erosion of your identity and your relevance.
It is the subtle, slow tragedy of being erased by non-action. Your identity, your character in this philosophy are forged through committed action and the assumption of consequence. The man who hesitates fails to imprint himself on the world.
He never makes a mark.
He never makes a mark. He shrinks his sphere of influence until he becomes functionally invisible, not only to other people, but, and this is critical, to himself.
So he hasn't failed in some spectacular, memorable fashion.
No. He has simply become irrelevant by refusing to enter the arena and risk taking the hit.
The result is a life lived in a permanent state of potential that was never actualized, a ghost of what he could have been, defined entirely by the choices he refused to make.
And to choose is to declare, I am here, and this is my direction, with all the accompanying risk. But to hesitate is to whisper, I am unsure, Perhaps I should wait to truly exist later.
But later never comes.
Later never comes because the clock keeps running and the world moves on without the commitment you failed to provide. Hashtag Teriyat outro.
So this deep dive has presented an incredibly forceful, a very high-pressure philosophy that is designed to shatter analysis paralysis. We've analyzed a perspective that insists indecision is not cautious planning,
But an active psychological avoidance of responsibility defined by the fear of consequence.
We established that true strength in this uncompromising view is defined entirely by commitment over certainty.
Right. The willingness to choose, take the inevitable hit, rapidly adjust, and just maintain momentum. And we discuss the heavy, quiet toll paid by those who delay. The slow forfeiture of agency, which inevitably leads to a life chosen for you by external indifferent forces.
This philosophy fundamentally challenges the common cultural acceptance of overthinking as a benign or even an intellectual trait, and it reframes it as a moral and operational failure. It forces a radical self-inventory of where you, right now, are ceding control.
What stands out here, I think, is that the source provides no safety nets. It allows for no excuses. It demands a complete accounting of your current state of decision-making. If you find yourself in a situation where external forces are dictating your outcomes in your job, your relationships, your physical or financial future, you have to confront the question of agency.
Because if life chooses for you and you hate the result,
Then who truly is responsible for the outcome you hate? The inability to ignore that question is the ultimate measure of commitment this source demands of you.